Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today I am really pleased to have with me on the line Ean Murphy. Ean is the founder and CEO of Moxie Bookkeeping and Consulting. And what's really cool about this, one of the reasons why I'm really endeared here is because she talks all about profit first. So I'm going to let her, explain it better than I can. But what Ean does is that she helps small businesses and creatives manage their books without complicated software, spreadsheets, or even jargon, which I think is something that a lot of us really need. So, Ean, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is going to be a lot of fun today. Can you tell me a little bit about who you are and how you got into not only the bookkeeping, but also the coaching part of helping small businesses, get their books done?
Yes. Well, let me start by telling you I was not born a bookkeeper. I went to college and got a liberal arts degree, and it turned out that, that left me with a whole lot of time, not a whole lot of marketable skills. So I took some odd jobs. I worked as a temp for a while in offices, and I bartended and just tried to kind of live my life. And unfortunately, the foundation of all of that was that I was financially illiterate and I didn't know it. I'd come from a kind of standard, middle class family where we always had enough, but not too much. But money was just something that you didn't talk about. And so as a result of that, I didn't know how to read any of the warning signs that were presenting themselves to me that I was under earning. I mean, I knew that I couldn't make my bills every month, but if I'd ask for a raise, I'd be told, oh, we can't afford that. Or if I had a bad night, where there was no tips, or if I changed jobs or changed apartments or had any kind of unusual expense, it just pushed me further and further into debt until I was tens of thousands of dollars in debt by my mid-20s, and ended up declaring bankruptcy, which was a big wake-up call. And I laugh about it now, but it was incredibly painful at the time. It felt like I'd broken my word, which was very important to me. I like to think of myself as someone with integrity. And so I began this kind of lifelong journey from that point to learn as much as I can about how money works and why it works better for some than for others. And it turned out that one of my skills was bookkeeping, partly because it's the only place in life that I've ever found achievable perfection, right? The books are either right or they're not. 2 + 2 only ever equals 4. And if you get something other than 4, you just got to go back and be like, oh, that's because I wrote 2 as 3 instead, and fix it. So that was huge. And I, was sort of getting paid to learn about how money works in a small business context and in my own personal context as well. And every kind of step that I would master, my small business would grow from freelance to an actual business. And I'd be asked a new question by a client that I just didn't know the answer to, that would drive me crazy. And I'd have to go find that answer. And so that, sort of carried on until about 5 years ago, when a client introduced me to this book, Profit First. And when I first read it, I was like, I don't get it. Why wouldn't you just look at your reports? Until I realized that simple system was the system that I was using in my personal life to have recovered from bankruptcy and avoid debt again. That was the system that let me set it and forget it and be able to only check a couple of quick data points to be like, yeah, I'm fine. Let me go back to trying to figure out how money works, not realizing that I already sort of had the answer sitting in my backyard. And so it just changed the way that our business works. And that's how we became, and coaching on this Moxie bookkeeping thing. And, as we,
yeah. Let's define this for the audience,
yes.
Just in case, because not everyone has heard about Profit First. I can tell you that because every time I change banking relationships, I'm always explaining to the banker, or the person that's signing me up. It's like, why do you need 10 bank accounts again?
Yeah.
So you kind of have, but you're going to get fees on all of these, right? And I'm like, well, okay. So can you give us like the 1 minute version of what Profit First is and
Absolutely.
why it is so amazing, especially for small businesses?
Yeah, and this is going to segue right into the one big tip, which is, what it comes down to. It's essentially the envelope system where you give every dollar a job and you give every dollar a home. And so what that means is you can now use that natural inclination of yours to wake up every morning and check your bank balance on your phone, and it will actually mean something because you don't have to back calculate from that. Oh, right, but payroll's about to clear, and oh, right, my annual insurance bill's about to come due, and oh, right, estimated taxes are about to happen. That because the money is separated out by purpose, you are intentionally and specifically setting aside profit, which isn't just profit, right? That's growth, stability, emergency fund. It funds your purpose. Profit has become such a leftover word, even in our reports, right? Income less expenses equals profits. It's the crumbs at the bottom of the barrel. And so the system of Profit First just flips that and says, no, 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 it should be income less profit equals expenses. And by separating out the profit and money for taxes and money for your owner's pay, you can then have a very natural budget that doesn't take any spreadsheets to do, to say, when I get new money in, I'm only allocating 30-40% to my overhead costs. So when I look at my operating bank balance, that's what I can afford. And if that's, cutting it real close to what I am obligated to pay each month, then I'm blowing the budget, and I need to really get creative about cutting back expenses in a way that doesn't harm the delivery of my service.
So I can tell you from the flip side, right? From someone who actually implements this, right? It is so refreshing, right? To know that, let's say, for example, I have payroll, right? And I know not only do I have to pay these people, their base amount, but then I have to pay, the income taxes, the federal, state, and whatever taxes for them. And when I fund that particular account ahead of time, that I know how much I'm going to be paying for payroll, I more or less know how much I'm going to be paying for taxes. And as soon as I get that out of my hair as soon as possible, it's literally set it and forget it. Right.
Yep.
And when you do that with, with recurring expenses, when you do that with, some of the hard expenses, and just, it's pretty easy to like keep a calendar, or, like of when, the 25th of the month, Netflix is going to take out, $19 or whatever. Right. So that just makes it a lot easier to think about, because the way most people run their businesses and and this is also very prevalent in their personal life, is that you have one checking account and one savings account, right? So you get this, you get paid, at the end of the month, you have $5,000 in the account, and you're like, whoo, I'm rich, going to Disney, right? And then you realize, like, 4 days later, you're negative $200, and it's like, well, how the hell did that happen? Well, you didn't exactly plan for it, right? You didn't calculate it right. You forgot about that $500 car payment or whatever it was, and it just makes things cleaner, right? It just
So
makes
clean.
things like really, just really clean. In your experience, what has been the net result? Like, first of all, you need to convince a business owner, like, hey, I need you to open up 8 more bank accounts, right? But what has been the net result of, after get them to find the Profit First religion, they actually implement it, and then, like, what do you see afterwards in terms of profitability and, the business owner's sanity?
Yeah, I mean, I see the profitability all over the place. In my own experience, when I decided to try it before I really, buckled down into it, because I read it, it made sense, but I like to break things before I try to convince anyone else to buy them. I was able to double my own take-home pay, and to me, that was like shocking. Because again, I'm a bookkeeper. I'm in my own books all the time. I'm a very frugal person, but it just shone a light on this habit that I had, where at the end of the month or the quarter or the year, I had money left over. And so I'd go, ooh, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to go to another convention? Do I want to, upgrade the computers? And I was thinking of ways, without realizing it, to turn my profit into expense. And so instead of saying, no, I as the owner should be taking home X amount of money for the work that I do in the business, and I should be taking home a profit distribution. Then when I was looking at, should I take this next online course? Should I, spend money on whatever? It was a very clear and intentional choice. Where is this money going to come from if I do it? And the answer that year was, well, it would come out of my owner's pay account because everything else is already accounted for. And I go, I don't want to give up my own, I would actually rather take that home. And the fact that I doubled that with nothing but attention, right? I mean, it wasn't like we brought in double the money on that. That was what sold me. And so I've seen everything from those similar experiences with clients. I've seen profit increases in the double digits almost every time, sometimes into the triple digits. But more than that, it's that piece of sanity that you're talking about. Because I definitely have some clients where there's no shift in profit. They're actually running very well-run businesses, but instead of being intentional about this is for taxes, this is for my pay, this is for profit, they just drew that out into their personal savings and then would have to put it back in the business for tax time or put it back in the business for a major expense or whatever it was. And so and that's why that's my one big tip, by simply giving every dollar a job and every dollar a home, they now had this depth of clarity that just let them relax finally in their business and say, I know exactly what's happening and I'm confident in what I can afford.
Amazing. That's amazing advice. As a bookkeeper, though, right? We were talking about this a little bit in the pre-call. Like every once in a while, I go and I price other bookkeepers and other accountants, things like that, and just to see whether who's more or less expensive than my current account, right? And usually, what I find is a lot of bookkeepers charge by the number of accounts that they need to manage, right? Now, that immediately doesn't work for us profit first people, right? Because it's like, well, I have 10 accounts. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to charge me $300 a month times 10? Like, no, that's not a bookkeeper. That's a Wall Street CPA, right? So how does that, from your perspective, when you're managing now 8 accounts per client, right, versus 1 or 2 that they had before, how does that translate into the workload for you and your team in terms of keeping all that straight? And then how is that able to translate back to the level of service that you are giving to your clients?
Yeah. So the beautiful thing is it really doesn't add much time at all to our workload, because other than your core operating expense account, everything else is transfers. So maybe you've got 2 or 3 transfers a month in each of those accounts, but they don't need to be coded or labeled as income or expense. And again, most software these days, you can just set up rules. So, in QuickBooks Online, you can even set it up to enter automatically, like, hey, when you see transfer 2 and these last 4 digits, just enter that. So, in some cases, it adds maybe 30 seconds per account for our workload. Like, it's minimal. I would also say that and obviously I'm biased here, it's super important, in my opinion, to work with a bookkeeper that understands, or an accountant that understands profit first, that we go through a very rigorous training program that looks at and addresses a bunch of different situations. And we have a community where we still come to each other, to ask questions. And we talk to Mike directly at least once a month. So I think it's really important to, it's like, you can get a haircut from anybody, but you're going to get a really different haircut from someone that went to barber school versus, someone who taught themselves. And that does not imply or guarantee quality, but you're certainly more likely to get a more professional result with someone who is a professional, if that makes sense.
One thing I've always wanted to ask someone who practices profit first, is there any business that you can think of that this does not work for?
No. And in fact, I was on a podcast a while ago with a guy that was an angel investor. And he was like, well, at some point you don't have to worry about money. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like 15 million still has to last. And if you're not careful, you can blow through. I've seen companies blow through 15 million in months. And so you still have to have a plan. You still have to know how long this is going to last for. So I've seen it work not only for, very small to very large businesses. I've seen it work really well for evaluating a business to buy and trying to determine the actual worth of it, because again, just because they've got a fat bottom line doesn't mean that the owner is getting paid well, doesn't mean that they have any kind of emergency savings, doesn't mean that they're actually profitable. I've seen it work for people who are just starting up to start on the right foot. How do I know while I'm pre-revenue what's appropriate? And the answer is, well, who's covering the expenses until you become an earning business? Well, usually it's the owner themselves. Well, okay, well, how much can you afford to put in? Use that as your income. And the percentages might be different because you don't have to, save for taxes if you're not earning any money. But the habit should still be in there. The structure should still be in there.
I love that term pre-revenue, right? I think I heard it the first time on Shark Tank, and these guys were just like, "Oh yeah, so you're not making money. We're pre-revenue," and it's like, "Yeah, okay, so you didn't make $1 yet. All right, so like we get it, right?" But the fact of the matter is, not every business needs to make a profit in order to create value, right? I mean, if you're creating, if you're creating a system that has managed to attract, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of users, but your costs for attending to those users still surpasses how much you're collecting from them. There is still a lot of innate value within those users that doesn't necessarily translate into revenue, at least under the current model that you have, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really think about, right? Because take the digital marketing agency model. Like we have a lot of fixed expenses, like for project management software, for storage, for data storage, data reporting type stuff, right? And some of those tools can get quite pricey, right? But so then it becomes a question of, well, does one client pay for it, or does two clients? Like, how many clients do I need in order to surpass those hard expenses, and then really start to make a profit, really be able to scale up, as opposed to just being able to stay in your lane, service the same five guys, and you're good, right?
Yeah. And again, if that's what you wanted to do, stay in your lane, serve the same five guys, fine, right? I think there's the concept of the big enough business also often doesn't get talked about enough. People that have these sort of home-based businesses that, what they're really trying to do is supplement their partner's income, or, just help their kids get through school, or whatever it is, where again, it doesn't have to be a full-blown corporate endeavor, that you still need to manage the what's in, what's out, and spend your money in the wisest way possible, and know, again, where's the money coming from to cover those expenses, whether it's sales, investment, or you.
Exactly. Wow, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. Can you please tell everyone where they can learn more about your company and how they
Sure.
can reach out to you directly if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm everywhere you'd expect me to be. So for sure, I'm on LinkedIn under my own name, Ean Price Murphy. Our company, Moxie Bookkeeping, has a website that you can go to. And we have a little freebie on there. What's it called right now? I think of it as Keep More. It's the 4 simple steps of permanent profitability without selling your soul. That again, just sort of introduces the concept of profit first. We have a Facebook group, but just just email me directly. I love the conversation more than anything, and we've got groups all the time. I always think of the profit first and the bookkeeping like beans and rice. Like, they're great each on its own, and you can do magical things with both of them. But when they come together, that's when things really get complete and amazing. So we do profit first, whether you use us for your bookkeeper or not. So if you're doing your own bookkeeping, or you have a bookkeeper that you love, that's totally okay with us. We're still absolutely happy to work with profit first. And if you have someone doing profit first with you, then we're willing to do your bookkeeping. But we won't do your bookkeeping if you're not committed to the profit first system, because just, being on this side of the pandemic, it feels irresponsible for me as a bookkeeper to not gently shove you into using that system.
I think that goes back to the coaching aspect of what it is that you were talking about, and that, it's one thing to just code, the transactions that fly through your bank account, but it's another thing, to really educate, someone to make the right decisions about where the money is actually going and to allocate it. We're not talking about making a budget. We're not talking about, like an earnings release that public companies need to do. You really just need to understand where it's coming from and where it's going. And if you can help people, visualize that, and having 8 bank accounts when you open up your Bank of America thing will really help you do that, because you can change the name on them, right? This is my taxes account. This is my payroll account. This is my savings account. This is my profit account, right? And it makes things so much easier. I just tell everyone about it. And if they don't do it, then I'll say, all right, yeah, good luck to you. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not that you can't do it. It's just, why wouldn't you take that? Why would you still ride a bicycle when you could take an airplane to get there? And I feel like that's the piece that's really missing. I know we're wrapping up, but the piece that's really missing is small business owners saying, I don't know who to turn to get this question answered. I just need to know what I can afford. I understand what I'm looking at when I'm looking at my P&L, but I still don't know what to do about it. And so that was, what we were sort of talking about earlier about the coach versus consultant, or the coach-sultant, as I like to say, where it's really this blend of not just inquiring and discovering together what your values are, which is important, but if that's not paired with strong tactical consulting work of like, great, now go do, which is one of the things I love about this podcast, right? What's the one tip? What's the one thing that we're going to do today that the theory has to be matched to action?
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ean, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today and to share this knowledge with the audience. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.